All right, good morning. My name is Paulina Martinez. I am part of the planning committee for the Legacy Conference. And right here I have Joyce Marter. Joyce Marter is a licensed clinical professional counselor since 1998, providing therapy for individuals, couples, and families dealing with issues related to mental health, addiction, relationships, and personal and professional development. Marter is the founder of Urban Balance, a counseling practice she started in 2004 and grew over 100 therapists working from 9 locations during her 13-year tenure as CEO. She has been awarded the Distinguished Alumni of the Year in 2008 by the Family Institute at Northwestern University and selected by Crain's Chicago Business for the 40 Under 40 list of 2010. Marter is currently the Vice President of Marketing and PR for Refresh Mental Health, a company that owns and operates outpatient mental health practices throughout the United States. She is the chair-elect of the Midwest region of the American Counseling Association, immediate past president of the Illinois Counseling Association, and a 2-term past president of the Illinois Mental Health Counselors Association. With a passion for applying psychology to business, Marter is a public speaker for corporations, universities, and counseling organizations. She's a blogger of Psych Central and the Huffington Post and currently has a book in development. Marter is routinely consulted as a psychological expert in the media and has been featured in such outlets as the Wall Street Journal, U.S. News and World Report, CNN, and MTV. Please join Joyce.
Thank you so much, Paulina. Thank you. I'm so sorry that bio was so long. I was so embarrassed. I was feeling like I'm the difficult person having you all listen to that. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. As Paulina said, I'm a therapist, and I'm also a business owner. And over the past 20 years, something that I've become really passionate about is conflict resolution, because we all need it, personally and professionally. And difficult people are part of our lives. They might be in our families. They might be our partner. They might be our sister. They might be our boss, or our coworker, or our neighbor, or in our friend group. And today, I'm really honored, and I thank you for being here, and I'm honored to speak with you and share what I've learned from 20 years of counseling clients to help you navigate these challenging personality types so that you have some tools in your toolbox and your feathers might not get as ruffled, because it takes energy out of us when we are dealing with difficult people. So, how people affect us. I really believe that feelings are waves of energy that we experience in the body. So, how about those toxic people? You know who I'm talking about. I had a girlfriend that I would get together with her for brunch every few months. And I realized every time I came home, I had to take Advil, because it was a toxic relationship. It was not a mutual or reciprocal friendship. She was kind of venting to me, and I was absorbing it and then getting a headache. So we need to be aware of how difficult people affect our feelings and how we experience those in the body. And we can learn how to manage those differently, those feelings of frustration or irritation, which are a normal response, right? We're human. So if somebody upsets us, it's normal for us to have those feelings, but we can learn how to manage them in a way that best serves us and keeps us healthy and well. Difficult people also affect our thinking. They can cause our thinking to become negative, almost like an infection. And we can start to look at them with judgment and become angry. So paying attention to our self-talk. In therapy, we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, which really says that our thoughts precede our emotions and our behaviors. So if we can change our thinking, we can change our feelings and behaviors. So we're going to give you some tools to do that today. Our behaviors are when we get hooked with the negative person and we become reactive. We might become defensive. We might make excuses. We might argue with them. We might pick up our side of the rope in the game of tug of war. And that can sometimes lead to conflict. So we're going to move through how to deal with them. So who exactly are these difficult people? They might be people who are under stress. We all experience stress at different points in our lives. I'm embarrassed to say I was with my 13-year-old daughter at the doctor's the other day, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry, the paperwork that you submitted online just disappeared. It was a glitch. We need you to fill it out again." And I sat there for 20 minutes, filled it out, and they said, "Oh, it disappeared again." And I felt like I became a difficult person. I was upset. My feathers were ruffled because I was under stress. I had a lot of different things going on. So did I behave my best? No. Am I a mental health professional and middle-aged person? Yes. It's kind of embarrassing, but we're human beings, and we don't always act perfectly. And so we need to recognize that sometimes people are under stress. It doesn't mean they're always a jerk. They're just maybe not behaving well in the moment. So taking that into consideration. Obviously, I'm a mental health professional, and I believe we all have mental health issues, just like we have physical health issues. Personally, I think we all deal with whether it's anxiety or depression, certainly stress, relationship issues, grief. It's just part of being a person. It doesn't mean we're crazy. It doesn't mean we're in crisis. We're just people doing our best. But we need to take into consideration that sometimes these difficult people may be dealing with a more serious mental health issue. Maybe they're dealing with depression, maybe they have a substance abuse issue, or something else that's contributing to their behavior. Substance abuse affects so many people. 1 out of 10 of us has a problem with drugs or alcohol. 1 out of 7 of us have someone we love that's in our families or in our lives who has a problem with drugs or alcohol. I actually think those statistics are probably pretty low. I think nowadays addiction can be gambling, it can be porn, sex addiction, shopping, and it affects people, it affects their lives. So sometimes difficult people may be dealing with addiction issues. Trauma survivors. Trauma is something that affects somebody's coping skills and their way of operating in the world. And we need to have compassion. We need to understand that not everybody has had the same experiences that we've had. And we don't know what they've been through. So I'm asking you to please take these things into consideration when you're dealing with somebody who isn't behaving their best. Sometimes people are in challenging phases of life. I mentioned I have a 13-year-old. I also have a 17-year-old. So I have lots of opportunities to deal with difficult people. And that happens. I mean, at different phases of life, we may be more stressed. We may be dealing with different issues. So just keeping that in mind for yourself and also for anybody who you might be dealing with. Again, all of us can be difficult people at times. I was feeling kind of morally superior and a little bit smug the other day because I was thinking, you know what? I don't have road rage. I just don't. I'm just not one of those people. And then it occurred to me, it's probably because I cause it. Right? So we need to have some self-awareness that we may think we're all high and mighty, but we've got our stuff too. Everybody does. We're people, and we're all works in progress. So it's about being conscious of that and also compassionate. So understanding your role. Whenever you have a conflict with someone, there's an event. There's something that happens. And I love the work of Eckhart Tolle. He wrote The Power of Now and A New Earth. He's brilliant. Follow him on social media if you're interested in learning more. And he says that an event is always neutral. It just is what it is. It is our thinking that makes it either positive or negative. So we want to be aware of what our perceptions are. What are our thoughts? that are going through our head? What are our assumptions? What are our biases? And we want to take into account our cultural biases and be mindful of those, because we all have biases. And so we want to be aware of what maybe is filtering how we're viewing things, just like that keynote speaker was talking about. And then our role, we have the choice in terms of how we respond. We cannot control other people. As a therapist, I've had a lot of people on my couch talking about other people. I've done it myself. I think we all need counseling at different points in our lives. And the first time I was in counseling, my mother starred in the counseling sessions. And the second time I was in counseling, I talked all about my ex-husband. And it wasn't until I started to talk about myself that my life began to change. So we want to take a look at our own role. What are our responsibilities? What are our responses in situations? That's what we can control. We can't control other people. We can't control their responses, their behaviors, or their actions. We can only control our own. So I want to empower you to work on that, because the more that we can better ourselves, the more skilled we can be at dealing with these difficult people. And then, obviously, whenever there's conflict, there's a consequence. There's an outcome to it. So recently, I had an event, which was this PowerPoint presentation. I had hired a very talented graphic designer to help me with the PowerPoint presentation. And she had said, no problem, I'll have it to you by the 13th. And on the 11th, I got an email from her that said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to get to this until the 20th. And I was like, oh no, that's after the legacy project, and that's not going to do any good. And I panicked, and I wanted to respond, part of me, and say, you know what, I can't work with you again, and I'm going to have to find somebody else. And thankfully, I did take pause, and I said, I think we've had a misunderstanding. This event is on the 17th. And I wrote a very diplomatic email, thankfully, and she responded that I misunderstood. She was talking about something else. So thank God that I didn't fire off some hot response to her, or I would have really damaged that relationship. Those things happen all the time. Actually, another time, I remember she got an email from a man who used to be our boss. And it said, hey, would you please pick up some gift certificates for me? And he said, I need some gift certificates. And she was pretty offended, because she's a really talented designer and person with her master's degree, and that's not her role. And she said, is he being serious? And thankfully, I looked at the email and realized it was spam. It was somebody trying to get her to buy gift cards and send them to them. So thankfully, sometimes just pausing before you respond can help outcome. So consider what you don't know. So sometimes you don't know what people are going through. I remember when I was 28, I lost my father. And a couple days later, my mother suggested, hey, why don't we go rent a movie? This was back in the day of Blockbuster. And I remember I had like a little conflict with the video guy. And it was because I wasn't in a good space. I was in grief, I was crabby, I was angry, I was sad. He didn't know that, but he was still really nice to me. And we have the choice to be kind to people when they're not in a good space, and to give them the benefit of the doubt that they may be going through something that we don't know. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. They may have other stressors, they may have less support, they may have different emotional or relational skills than you have. And so just being compassionate about that and grateful that you are who you are and you're able to respond differently. Also, trauma history. And that's something in my work with clients that I really have deep compassion for, because many people live with trauma, all different forms of trauma. It might be abuse in their family of origin. It might be some experience that they went through, but recognizing that that shapes and molds people into who they are. I really believe our emotions are a normal response to our nature and our nurture, always. And while it may seem sometimes that people are over-responding, it's often because whatever that event is tapping into a whole well of feelings that they have from old stuff. And it's all coming out. So it seems disproportionate to the event, but it really is a normal response to their own unique history. So just keeping that in mind. So I am empowering you to develop your emotional intelligence. Clearly, you all are successful people. You're here at the Legacy Project, and you've learned some of these things, but I think that we're all works in progress, and we can continue to develop these skills. So knowing your own emotions. How many of you meditate? Wonderful. I'd like all of you to give it a try. So there's an app called Headspace, if you don't know how to meditate, and there's another one called Calm. And meditation is like rebooting your mind, body, and spirit. It just clears your operating system so that you don't have all those windows open and feel stressed. And it helps you become aware, to become mindful of the feelings that you have in your body. I practice yoga, and I'm currently going through yoga teacher training. And yoga is actually meditation with movement. So by practicing yoga, you can become more aware of where you're holding energy in your body. We all hold stress or anxiety, worry, tension, and becoming aware of how we're experiencing that gives us emotional intelligence because we understand when we're triggered. We understand when we're not in a good space. And then we can learn how to take pause and respond differently. Also, managing your emotions. So we have a responsibility to be our best selves. And again, we're all works in progress. And I believe for those of us who are parents, modeling is the most effective form of parenting. So our kids learn from us how we manage conflict and how we manage relationships. So the best way to teach them is to set a good example. So learning how to manage our emotions so that we're responding in a way that's kind and compassionate and diplomatic. Also motivating yourself to deal with difficult people or conflict in a way that's going to lead to resolution, that's going to lead to growth. I always say that conflict or stress is an opportunity to learn new skills. I love the expression, come wind, help my roots grow strong. Did you know that trees need the wind? They need the wind to grow their roots. And for us, when we deal with difficult people, they can cause us to grow. I think about an old boss that I had that was really difficult. She micromanaged, and she put me down at every chance that she had. She would tell me I didn't look right, I didn't write right, I didn't speak right. It was really upsetting and pretty demoralizing. And I wish I had the skills that I have today through practicing and making mistakes when I was dealing with her in my 20s. But what's interesting is I ended up leaving that job because it was not a healthy environment for me. And I'm so grateful for her because if she hadn't been that way, I might have stayed at that job. I would have never started my own business, which grew to, like Paulina said, over 100 therapists now. That's pretty amazing. I would still be at that job. I liked that job otherwise. So sometimes I think the universe puts difficult people in our place to redirect us on the path that we need to be on, or to help us learn skills that we need to learn to show that we care about ourselves. We also want to recognize and consider other people's emotions. So in counseling, empathy is kind of the magic wand of the relationship between the therapist and the client. Empathy is like, it is a magic wand that we can all use in our lives. And it's the ability to express to someone that you understand how they feel. When I was in college, I actually hostessed at the Cheesecake Factory in downtown Chicago in the John Hancock Center. And the reason the manager put me in the line with all the people who were upset because their quote was way beyond what they were told. They were told it's going to be 20 minutes, and it was an hour and a half. And I was practicing my empathy skills. So I would say, I'm so sorry, I understand you're upset. Of course you're frustrated. Because people, their anger becomes diffused when they feel heard. So sometimes people just up the ante and they get louder if they're not feeling heard. So you might not agree necessarily with their responses, but you can reflect that you understand where they're coming from. And that's going to diffuse their anger. And managing relationships and the emotions of others. As my business developed, I learned that managing my leadership team was one of the most important skills that I had. They were my greatest resource. Very, very talented people that I wanted to stay in the organization. And they didn't always see eye to eye with each other or with me. And my main job became managing those relationships so that everyone felt heard, that I could draw upon their strengths, that I could diffuse any conflicts. And that was really important for the success of our organization. I can only imagine how important that is in government. So this is a skill that you all can continue to develop. Low EQ. This is when we get emotionally triggered and we're not our best self. So it might include things like being aggressive or passive aggressive. Again, assertiveness is what we want to strive to be. When people have low emotional intelligence, they might result in scapegoating or gossiping or blaming other people or even bullying. And this is low energy behavior, right? And we all do this from time to time. So I'm just asking you just to be aware of it. Just notice if you're participating in these things, because while it may feel like healthy venting, it's actually bringing you down. You know, and it can be, organizations are like family systems. We're each part of the machine. And if one person is negative, it's like a bad apple. It infects the whole organization. So being mindful about what your role is and noticing when other people are behaving that way. If someone's gossiping to you, you can say, you know what, I like her. Or, you know, I'm sorry she's going through that hard situation. I wish her well. And cut it short. Just don't participate in that. So high emotional intelligence is low insecurity. It's when you honor your strengths and your confidence and your talents, and you have respect for yourself. You hang on to your confidence. That's really important. And it also reflects high openness. When you're open to other people and other ways of doing things. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who you know isn't really listening to you? That can lead to conflict. So being open to hearing others and considering other points of view, diversity is always a strength. So we're smarter together than any one of us is by ourselves. So being open to other ways of looking at things is emotionally intelligent. We're going to talk more about assertive behavior, but that is the key, I think, to success in business and life. It's the ability to find your voice and to speak your truth in a way that's honest and direct and clear and respectful of yourself as well as the other person. And that can really diffuse conflict. High emotional intelligence is when you're self-aware, when you recognize your own role in things and how you might be contributing to the conflict in some way. You also want to be inclusive and respectful. So there's a process when we're communicating with people, and the first step is really to understand them, to listen, and use those reflective listening skills. Are you looking at your phone? Are you looking at your computer while you're listening to someone? You want to look at them, look at their face, 80% of communication is nonverbal. So you want to look into their eyes, you want to look at their face, notice their body language, really listen to what they're saying, and reflect that understanding with empathy, with responding to what you've heard, restating what you've heard. So what I understand is you're trying to tell me you'd like it if I came on time, something like that, so that you are expressing that. Noticing when your emotional brain has been triggered. So this is all coming from a book about emotional intelligence written by Daniel Goleman. And it's a great book if you're looking for how to improve your emotional intelligence. I encourage you to check it out. But you want to learn how to observe your process and notice how other people are responding to you. Are they shutting down? Are they becoming escalated? Are they feeling open and collaborative with you? You want to facilitate that kind of positive collaboration with others. If you're having challenges in a conflict, take pause, regroup, and decide to come visit it at a different point. If you're in a meeting that isn't going well, you can restate what's going on and say, why don't we each take some time and kind of think about this and talk again tomorrow. And we'll follow up on this. And then you can kind of regroup, maybe get some advice from another colleague or friend as to how to better deal with that situation. And yeah, seeking help and re-engaging when you're not triggered. So John Gottman is a really brilliant psychologist, and he is the leading researcher on marriages and couples relationships. And he has identified 4 things that lead to relationship meltdown. And I think it's important for us all to recognize them when we do them and when other people are doing them, so we know what's happening. So the first one is criticism. And in any given situation, it's perfectly fine to express if we don't like a certain specific behavior. But we don't want to attack the person. And criticism is when we attack the person. Contempt. This is something, criticism and contempt are 2 things that women are typically a little bit more guilty of than the last 2 things that men are typically a little bit more guilty of. But again, we can do them all. So contempt are things like eye rolling, or sometimes I make a noise that's like, it just adds fuel to the fire. It's not very nice. It makes people mad. So being aware when you're doing those kinds of behaviors. Stonewalling, when someone shuts down. We know that that can be very infuriating at times. And also defensiveness, just making excuses. We could all save each other a lot of time if we learned how to not be defensive and to take responsibility for ourselves. So continuing to work on those things. There are different conflict styles. Some people are passive, and some people are very aggressive. I always say that healthy self-esteem is midway between diva and doormat. So the diva is somebody who is kind of entitled and not very respectful of other people's boundaries. And the doormat is not very respectful of his or her own boundaries. And so in the middle is the diplomat. And that's that person that's able to be respectful of themselves and somebody else. And that affects how you communicate. So we have these difficult personality types that we're going to go through today. There's the know-it-all expert, the bully, the procrastinator, the whiner, and the silent type. So the know-it-all experts, who are these people? In therapy land, what is their diagnosis? Narcissists. The narcissists, they're tough. They're tough. And we all have them in our lives in different ways. So the know-it-alls and how to deal with them. Here are some different tips. A lot of times, the narcissists actually have low self-esteem. And in order to compensate for their low self-esteem, they're peacocking. and they're acting arrogant and grandiose. But truthfully, they don't feel so great on the inside, and they're pretty insecure. So they have a need to be right all the time. It can be really challenging. I had lunch the other day with an attorney. I give this presentation for attorneys and mediators and other people who deal with conflict. And she specializes in helping women who have divorced somebody who is a narcissist. And her way of dealing with it is pretty brilliant, and it fits with this presentation. She said she makes them right. So isn't that interesting? So if they say they want 50-50 custody, but they're moving to Florida, she says, great idea. Perfect. That sounds good. Okay, so you're going to have to fly in every Wednesday for dinner, and then every weekend you're going to have to fly in to pick up the kids and then fly back with them. And then once they realize that's not possible, then she's like, oh, I guess you're right. That's not possible. So you see how you're kind of making it their idea? It's a skill. But in my own experience with somebody who's narcissistic, I just kind of notice it. People who are personality disordered often have had significant trauma. And when they have a personality disorder, you'll notice these people have high conflict in their relationships. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of ended relationships, kind of crash and burn. And that's a signal that somebody may be dealing with a more chronic personality issue that makes them difficult. It's different than you or I being stressed out or having a bad day. It's part of their personality, and it can be really challenging to deal with them. With the narcissist, my own personal strategy is I start out by letting them know how I recognize how important they are. I recognize how smart and talented they are, and I do that so that they don't feel the need to continue to tell me. And it helps. It saves us all some time. So you don't want to argue with them. You want to have some realistic expectations. Narcissists are not good at empathy. That's part of the issue. They truly cannot put themselves in somebody else's shoes and imagine how they might feel. Did you have a question? A really good point. And so the point, if some of you couldn't hear, is that if you're in a workplace dynamic or group dynamic and you're praising the narcissist, other people in the group may become resentful because maybe they're working just as hard or harder. And so that brings up an important point, that when you're dealing with difficult people, it matters what the power differential is. It matters what your role is. You're going to respond differently if the know-it-all is your kid versus your boss versus your president. So you want... Some of you got that. So just paying attention to that. And so if you're a supervisor and you have a young budding narcissist on your team, you might acknowledge what they've done, but set a boundary. Like, okay, you've done well. Now we need to acknowledge other people. There's some diplomacy in setting limits. And again, it's that diva doormat thing. You want to hang on to your confidence and set limits and boundaries with them. So yes, it's acknowledging what they've done and setting them up for success in their role, and maybe even empathizing with other people what it's like to work with them. And they may do well in certain leadership roles or other roles where they're autonomous and not as well in team situations. So that's something to be mindful of. The bully. Again, people who are bullied often have a trauma history. So using that compassionate lens again and just taking a step back before you judge and considering you don't know what this person's been through. And it's really difficult dealing with them. So you want to kind of separate yourself from them in terms of protecting your energy. So you might imagine that you're surrounded by a white light. I have a friend who imagines there's a shield of plexiglass between her and that other kind of toxic person. But with the bullies, you really want to hang on to your confidence because oftentimes they try to make you feel small. I was once at Target, and the woman in front of me was screaming at the cashier. She was really rude to him. And he handled it so well, he just continued to check out her items and responded perfectly professionally to her. And when it got to be my turn, I said to him, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that woman was so rude to you. And you're amazing. How'd you do that? How'd you stay so professional and calm and cool and collected? And he said, oh, I don't let anyone in my head who isn't paying rent. That's detachment. It doesn't mean we don't care. It's just that we're separating ourselves a bit from that person. We're not giving them the power to determine how we feel about ourselves. You want to be professional. I have a friend who is 4'8". She's one of the tiniest people I know. And she carries herself with confidence. And she said even when she goes on the airplane, she sits down and claims her space. So she holds herself in a way that shows that she's respecting herself. So with the bully, you want to hang on to your confidence. You want to be professional. Use I statements. So this is a conflict resolution tip that we use in couples therapy. People become less defensive when we speak in terms of I instead of saying you. So instead of saying, you would say, I would feel better if you weren't swearing at me, instead of you're a jerk. So it's focusing on a specific behavior and making an I statement and setting a boundary instead of attacking the person. So being assertive and trying really hard not to get hooked. The procrastinators are really frustrating. And did you know that procrastinators are often perfectionists? And I heard a man speaking about perfectionism recently, and he said, done is better than perfect, which I think is really smart. And all of us can be procrastinators at some point, and it's really frustrating for other people who are depending on us. So if we have someone in our life, whether it's at work or at home, who's a procrastinator, these are some skills. You want to communicate with them regularly. How are you doing on that goal? You want to appreciate the perfectionism. Give them any positive feedback that you can on any progress that you make. That's going to make them feel better. And help them understand what is really going on. Why are they avoiding a certain task? How can you help them transcend that and move forward? And ask for their help. Partner with them, ally with them to help them make certain deadlines. Any questions or comments about this? About the procrastinator? Yes. Yes. Yeah. What if that customer didn't stop because he didn't feel successful? There are people like that that just do not stop until you crack. I think if someone doesn't stop, you have to disengage. So you have to remove yourself from the situation. So if somebody is bullying you, and they are relentless and they are not letting go, you're going to have to figure out how to remove or extract yourself from that situation. So it may, in the Target example, be, I'm going to go get my supervisor. It seems like you're really upset. I'd like you to get the help that you need to feel better. And go and do that. So asking for the help of others, stepping away. Again, it takes two to have a tug of war. My friend Ross and I both have pretty significant egos sometimes, and we sometimes clash. And we'll have a difference of opinion, and he sometimes will say, hey, Joyce, can we just reboot? Which really requires both people to let go. And the bully may not be willing to do that, but you can certainly ask. Like, hey, it seems like things are kind of escalated. Can we take a break from this and step back? So procrastinators are tough. The whiners, they can take a lot of time, right? So one tactic that I have for them, again, some empathy, letting them know that they've been heard. You know, I understand that you're not happy with this, so that they maybe can feel satisfied instead of continuing. And then putting a time limit on it. You know, letting them know I have 5 minutes and then we're going to need to start working on our project together. So I like the don't be a duck. My kid's social worker at school used to say that. She would tell the kids, just be a duck. Let it roll off your feathers instead of absorbing their negativity. So we have that choice. Helping them determine what is it that they really want. Because sometimes people get stuck in kind of a victim mode and they continue to complain. So you want to help them. Somebody's identifying with that over there. That happens sometimes. So you want to help them get out of that and figure out what's going to help them move forward. Sometimes when you suggest to a complainer, what happens? They don't want a solution. That's a great insight. They'll tell you why it won't work. I had a guy come to me for therapy once, and he was kind of like this. And I said, have you been in therapy before? And he said, yes, with 12 different therapists. And none of them were able to help me. It's like, wow, that's some pretty big information, because what's the common denominator? Him, right. Exactly. So, yeah, that can be tough when you're avoiding solutions. So just kind of not either agreeing or disagreeing, but using those listening skills and maybe protecting yourself again from these people, because they can bring you down. They can bring your energy down and affect your mood. So the unresponsive silent type, these people are usually passive, or they're being passive aggressive. They're secretly mad, and so they're just not communicating. And you can tell when their behaviors aren't aligned with how they're feeling. So I think about it even like when my husband will ask me sometimes, like, hey, is it okay if I go out for a drink with the guys? And if I'm like, yeah. You know, my behaviors aren't really aligning with what I'm saying, which is passive aggressive. So when you're dealing with people like this, you want to ask open-ended questions. Otherwise, you're going to get a yes or a no, or if it's a teenager, or whatever. So you want to ask something, tell me about your day, that they can't just say yes or no. And using a silent, friendly stare, that's really, oftentimes these quiet types are wanting, it's easy to try to fill the space. It's easy for you to talk more and make up for it. And so you just want to be mindful of that and not fall into that, and allow them to feel the responsibility to respond and share what's going on. And you can comment on how you're feeling about the process and the relationship. You can let them know that you'd want to hear from them how they're feeling. You want to know how you can improve things for them. And sometimes people who can't communicate well verbally might be able to write how they're feeling or what they need. They might be able to put it in an email or a document or a plan, so you can encourage them to do that as well. These are some things that I'd really like to go over with you briefly. There's some skills on how to deal with these. We have a few more minutes. You want to avoid a fight, flight, or freeze response when dealing with conflict. So again, using your mindfulness to pause, to breathe, and to respond appropriately. You want to avoid engaging in a tug of war. If you engage in the tug of war, you've been hooked, and you're going to have conflict. So you don't want to lock horns. A lot of times people have conflict about something that isn't really the problem. I remember once I had a couples counseling session, and this couple was fighting, and the guy was like, and then Matt Lauer was on TV, and she said, it's not about Matt Lauer. What they were arguing about was much bigger. You want to figure out what's the root issue and unhook from the minutia. Kind of zoom out and gain a bigger perspective. So like with the Target example, that's a blip in time. It's not worth getting upset about. So learning how to zoom out and understand that these issues may be one short moment in your life. Getting rooted in the present is super important. It helps us all deal with situations in a way that's less reactive. And just being flexible and adaptable, I think, is also important. Forgiveness is a way to move through interactions with difficult people. Again, that compassion, that empathy, and forgiveness, if for no other reason than for yourself, it helps you free yourself from anger that keeps you tethered to the past. So if you're harboring resentment at somebody in your life, that can make you sick. It can make you depressed. It can make you anxious. And forgiving them, you can actually free yourself. And learning how to forgive yourself as well and to make amends when you've done something wrong, I think, is really important. Here, I have some resources for you. If you text 345-345, if you text my name to that number, you'll get some resources on how to deal with difficult people. There's a really great website by Cloud and Townsend, not Clown, that talks about how to set healthy boundaries. They've got a lot of great videos and resources, and any slides and handouts are available if you text that number. So this is my social media. I'd love to be a support and a resource to you in any way that I can. If you or someone you know is interested in counseling or therapy or any kind of workshop, please let me know how I can help. I love posting inspirational quotes on my social media, so if you need something to pick you up when the weather is still not quite summer-ish, please follow me and let me know how I can be of service to you. Thank you so much for your time.